In our first movement video, we established that movement influences fluid dynamics, metabolic health, and overall tissue behavior. Now we need to talk about application. The effectiveness of movement in lipedema depends on matching intensity to tissue capacity. And intensity is not determined by motivation, but it is determined by your physiology. And when mechanical demand placed on the body exceeds what the tissue can currently tolerate, inflammatory stress increases and recovery slows. When training is appropriately scaled, the body adapts. That adaptation improves muscular support, metabolic stability, and improves circulation. And this right here is exactly why your phase of mobility matters. Because if you are in an immobility phase, your focus is on restoring circulation, improving joint integrity, and reestablishing neuromuscular connection. Movement during this phase is often controlled, seated, or supine, and designed to build tolerance rather than fatigue. Now, if you are in a low mobility phase, you can begin incorporating more structured standing movement and light resistance. The goal becomes building endurance and coordination without creating excessive inflammatory output. Now, in a moderate strength phase, progressive resistance training becomes appropriate. Muscle mass improves insulin sensitivity and supports long-term metabolic regulation. However, progression must still allow for adequate recovery. And in an advanced phase, higher loads and more complex movement patterns may be tolerated, but recovery remains a very critical variable. Now we layer in your current stage. As stage influences tissue characteristics, stage 1 tissue often tolerates progressive loading sooner because fibrosis is less pronounced. Stage 2 may require slower progression and more structured recovery. Stage 3 often involves greater mechanical strain and often requires a longer regulation phase before increasing intensity. Stage 4, or lipolipedema, frequently requires prioritizing fluid management and stability before progressing resistance. This means that both stage and mobility phase must be considered together. Someone in stage 3 who is also in an immobility phase requires a very different approach than someone in stage 1 who has already built a moderate strength foundation. And this is why training must match the internal capacity. Because when intensity is appropriately matched, muscle engagement improves, circulation improves, and the body adapts in a productive direction. But when intensity is excessive for the current state of the tissue, recovery becomes impaired and symptoms may increase. And this is why movement with lipedema cannot be random. It has to be structured, phased, and responsive to the body's current condition. And with lipedema, that is the difference between exercising and programming. That is the difference between exercising and programming. Movement during this phase is controlled, often seated, and designed. It has to be structured, phased, and responsive to the body's current condition. And with lipedema, that is the difference between exercising and programming.